Okay, so welcome back to this next video in which we are discussing the endothelium-dependent hyperpolarization. Okay, so we are now discussing the experiment that was done by Chen et al. In 1988. Okay, and he was using hemoglobin to inhibit nitric oxide, basically. Okay, and I want to explain to you how. Okay, right, so in order to understand how, we need to understand the structure of hemoglobin. Okay, so I've shown you that hemoglobin is this protein consisting of 4 subunits, 2 alpha globin proteins and 2 beta globin proteins. Okay, now each one of these proteins has a prosthetic heme group. Now I've shown you what a heme group is. What does it mean to be a prosthetic heme group? Well, basically, what you can do is you can stick one of these heme groups, which from now on, I will just draw as a square, like so, okay, to denote the porphyrin ring. And if I'm feeling generous, I might even stick a ferrous cation at the center of the square to denote even more that it's a heme group. So I might even put Fe2 plus at the center like that, and even maybe 2 bonds which are covalent and 2 bonds which are just electrostatic like that. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to bind this onto your proteins. So heme groups can be added on to proteins. They can bind to amino acid residues on proteins. And that, when you've got a heme group stuck on the side of a protein, that's what is meant by a prosthetic heme group. So a prosthetic, if you've got a prosthetic limb, what that means is you've got something stuck on the side of you, okay? So a prosthetic heme group means that it's stuck on the side of a protein. So prosthetic heme / heme group. Okay, so hemoglobin, each of these globin proteins of the hemoglobin protein has a prosthetic heme group stuck onto it. So let me draw these little pink squares to represent the prosthetic heme groups that are all stuck on these proteins. Okay, right. So every single, I don't know why that one was put down there. That wasn't, okay, so terribly consistent putting it down there. Never mind. The point is clear that they all have a prosthetic heme group stuck on them. And when you stitch a prosthetic heme group onto the protein, it's going to use one of these 3 covalent bonds. So let's say if we take this up here, it's going to use the coordinate bond that is going into the page, and that one's going to be used up in attaching the heme group onto the protein. But that still means that the heme group has one final coordinate bond coming out of the page that is still free. So at the moment it's in the 5 coordinate form bonded to these globin proteins. But it still has one coordinate bond free, and this coordinate bond is the one where oxygen binds. So basically, this is how hemoglobin transports oxygen. Oxygen will bind to the remaining 6th coordinate bond of the prosthetic heme groups on all 4 of these globin proteins. So one oxygen will bind here, one oxygen will bind here, one oxygen will bind here, and a final one here. So 4 oxygens will overall bind to a single hemoglobin protein, 1 to each of the prosthetic heme groups, and it's binding in this 6th coordinate bond position. However, nitric oxide can also bind in this 6th coordinate bond of the prosthetic heme groups of hemoglobin. So effectively, if you put hemoglobin over the endothelial cells, okay, then the nitric oxide that those endothelial cells are producing will bind to the prosthetic heme groups on these hemoglobin proteins. So effectively, you're quenching the nitric oxide. You are mopping up the nitric oxide that the endothelial cells are producing. Okay, so let's draw a nitric oxide molecule here. So nitric oxide, remember, has a nitrogen double bonded to an oxygen, and then it has a free electron that's on its own, basically, which makes nitric oxide a free radical. So this is nitric oxide here. Okay, now what will happen is this nitric oxide will bind to the ferrous cation at the centre of the phosphatic heme groups in that 6th coordinate bond position, and that will mop it up, basically. So hemoglobin, effectively, is an inhibitor of nitric oxide signalling between the endothelial cells and the smooth muscle cells. Okay, so Chen et al., what he did is he applied hemoglobin to the endothelial cells so that all the nitric oxide that the endothelial cells were producing would be mopped up by the hemoglobin and wouldn't get to the smooth muscle cells, was the idea. So he could then look and see whether when you stimulate the endothelial cells with acetylcholine or carbachol, and remember they bind to both of those chemicals bind to the M3 receptors on the endothelial cells. Now, we know that that's going to trigger the production of nitric oxide. The nitric oxide is now, however, all being mopped up, and we can see whether we still observe the endothelium-dependent hyperpolarization that Bolton et al. In 1984 had observed. Okay, and what he found is that you did, basically. So that shows that it is not nitric oxide that is producing this hyperpolarization of the smooth muscle cells, because when you apply hemoglobin, which mops up all the nitric oxide, you still see the endothelium-dependent hyperpolarization. If you needed any more convincing, he then took another drug which can inhibit the nitric oxide signaling. He took methylene blue. Okay? So, methylene blue. Now, methylene blue, basically, is an inhibitor of soluble guanylate cyclase. That's what the textbook will tell you. In reality, it's not really a proper inhibitor of nitric oxide, of guanylate cyclase. Okay, so let me just remind you of the way that nitric oxide works on smooth muscle cells. So, if we have our vascular smooth muscle cell here, the nitric oxide comes in from the endothelial cell. So here comes the nitric oxide, and it's going to act on the soluble guanylate cyclase. So let's have it acting on soluble guanylate cyclase, which we'll just abbreviate to SGC. Okay, and soluble guanylate cyclase is then going to start producing cyclic GMP, okay, which will activate protein kinase G, which will cause relaxation of the smooth muscle cell. Okay, right. So the point is that the main activity of nitric oxide is on this soluble guanylate cyclase. So we wanted to test whether the nitric oxide was interacting with the soluble guanylate cyclase, and then whether by some cyclic GMP mechanism this also caused hyperpolarization. Whether it was through protein kinase G or not, this assay wouldn't have told us. Now, you might think, well, why is he doing this second experiment? Surely we've already confirmed that through the hemoglobin, but this one adds to it, basically. So, what he did is he applied methylene blue. Now, what methylene blue does is it creates free radicals, okay, such as superoxide. Okay, so it's going to create free radicals, and free radicals are going to destroy the cyclic GMP. They cause cyclic GMP to go down. So basically, it doesn't actually inhibit the soluble guanylate cyclase. Instead, what it does is it reduces the cyclic GMP. So even if soluble guanylate cyclase is active, this is just going to destroy all the cyclic GMP. So it stops soluble guanylate cyclase actually producing cyclic GMP. It's what we might call a cyclic GMP reducer. It reduces the levels of cyclic GMP. Okay, so if we put this drug in, it's going to stop the production of cyclic GMP, okay, which is, we think, the main way that nitric oxide acts on smooth muscle cells, rather. Okay, so if we apply methylene blue, then we can then stimulate the endothelial cell with the acetylcholine or the carbachol. The endothelial cell will produce nitric oxide, it will go through to the vascular smooth muscle cell, it will act on the soluble guanylate cyclase, but now in the presence of methylene blue, you won't get any increase in cyclic GMP. Okay, and we can see whether stopping the increase in cyclic GMP in the vascular smooth muscle cell is going to remove the endothelium-dependent hyperpolarization, and it doesn't. Okay, so this shows us that cyclic GMP is not important in this process of the endothelium-dependent hyperpolarization. So we've seen that cyclic GMP is not important, we've seen that nitric oxide is not important. So, okay, let's have another look at another experiment done later. So, let me get another piece of paper. Okay, right, so if you needed any more convincing that it's not nitric oxide that is doing this to the smooth muscle cells, then another experiment was done again in 1988 by a scientist known as Taylor and his colleagues et al. So this was 1988. Okay, so what did Taylor do? Well, basically, he used the nitrovasodilator, sodium nitroprusside, which is often abbreviated to SNP. So this is sodium nitroprusside. So basically, what does this drug do? Well, if you give this drug to someone, what it does is it goes into the bloodstream and then it starts producing nitric oxide. So this drug will be in the blood. So here's the blood vessel here. Here are the endothelial cells here. Okay, like so. And then here is our drug, sodium nitroprusside. And what's going to happen is this is going to start producing nitric oxide. So it will undergo a chemical reaction, and in this chemical reaction it produces nitric oxide. Okay, so if you give this drug, it will cause the production of nitric oxide outside of the endothelium, basically. It doesn't involve the endothelium at all. So this basically is a way of producing nitric oxide without stimulating the endothelium. So what we can now see is, does this produce endothelium-dependent hyperpolarization? If nitric oxide is responsible for the production of this hyperpolarization when we stimulate the endothelium with acetylcholine or carbachol, then when we use the sodium nitroprusside, which is also going to produce nitric oxide, but without stimulating the endothelium, we should still see hyperpolarization. So it should go through to the vascular smooth muscle cells, which we'll draw here, and if this is responsible for hyperpolarization, we should see that the electrical potential difference across the membrane of this smooth muscle cell, which is usually approximately negative 60 millivolts, it should be hyperpolarized, and you don't see it. So no hyperpolarization is observed in response to the nitrovasodilator sodium nitroprusside. So this, once and for all, shows that nitric oxide is not responsible for hyperpolarizing these smooth muscle cells. Okay, so there is something to investigate here. How are the endothelial cells producing hyperpolarization in the vascular smooth muscle cells in response to acetylcholine or carbachol stimulation, in response to the activation of their M3 receptors? And that's what we're going to investigate in upcoming videos.